A 7-year-old girl clinging to her infant sister, swallowed by a blizzard that could erase mountains. Barefoot with nowhere to hide, just the wail of the wind and the promise she made to keep the baby breathing. Miles away, an officer and his loyal K9 partner catch a whisper in the gale. A sound that would change it all. What follows is a tale of profound courage, redemption, and a miracle of love in the darkest night. Before we start, where are you joining us from? Share your home in the comments below. And if you know that compassion echoes forever, join our community and witness this incredible journey. Snow like shattered glass descended on Aspen Hollow, Colorado, a mountain town buried deep beneath the Rockies, where the wind howled through pine canyons and every porch light trembled like a single prayer. That night, the storm arrived with a vengeance, devouring sound and color, making roads into rivers of white. At the town's edge, beyond the last lit gas station and a line of derelict freight cars, stood the old train depot. Its sign, Aspen Hollow Station, hung crooked, half-caked in frost. Inside, 2 small figures huddled together on a cold wooden bench, the old wood groaning beneath their trembling bodies. Leia Hart, only 7, held her infant sister pressed tightly to her heart. Her breath escaped in trembling clouds, her chapped lips whispering to the infant who was wrapped in a frayed blanket. "It's okay, Rosie. Mommy will find us. She has to." Rosie, only 6 months old, whimpered in response, her cry weak. Her cheeks had turned a pale, chilling blue beneath the wool, her tiny hands twitching with fever. The baby's head rested softly in the crook of Leia's elbow, where her sister's heart hammered against her own. The dim light from one flickering bulb threw long, trembling shadows that danced on the tiled floor. Leia's light brown hair, heavy and tangled with snow, fell across her eyes. She was swallowed by a man's old work coat, stained with grease and missing a button. She couldn't recall when the tears had stopped, only that the tears froze solid before they could fall. Hours earlier, the cabin on Hollow Ridge reeked of whiskey and cold ash. Travis Marrero slumped in a broken armchair, a half-empty bottle hanging from his hand. A tall, gaunt man in his mid-30s, his face lost in a scraggly beard with bloodshot eyes that betrayed a dangerous, twitching rage. His flannel shirt was unbuttoned, showing a tattoo of a serpent coiled up his neck. The fire in the hearth was long dead. The cabin sat in darkness save for the pale moonlight filtering through the window. Leia sat quietly on the floor by the crib, rocking her baby sister, as Travis paced the small room like a caged animal. "Do you hear that sound?" He muttered, his words slurred. "That's the sound of your mama never coming home." Rosie started to cry again, her tiny chest heaving, desperate for the warmth and the milk that was no longer there. Travis turned sharply, the veins in his neck pulsing. "Make her stop!" "She's hungry," Leia said, her own voice trembling. "There isn't any more milk." Travis's jaw clenched hard. "Then make her forget she's hungry." He threw the empty bottle hard against the wall. It exploded, scattering glass like ice across the floorboards. For a tense moment he stood there perfectly still. Then, something inside him shattered. He grabbed the torn blanket off the chair and stomped right to the door. The hinges screamed as he yanked it open, allowing the raging storm inside. "I'm done," he yelled. "You hear I'm done babysitting ghosts?" His voice, a rasp of venom and fear, cut through the air. "Your mother did this to you. Now get out!" Leia's world stopped. "Please, Mr. Travis, Rosie's so sick." "Out!" he thundered. With a brutal heave, he threw their meager possessions, 2 small bottles, a tattered blanket, and a worn-out rabbit out into the unforgiving snow. When Leia faltered, he seized her arm, his cruel grip instantly branding her skin red as he hauled her to the door. The Arctic blast struck her like a physical blow. "Go find your precious mother." He spat the words dripping with poison. "If she even wants you." Then the door slammed shut. The final echoing crack was devoured by the howling storm. For a heart-stopping moment, Leia just stood there clutching Rosie to her chest. Snow gnawed at her legs through her shredded stockings. The surrounding trees loomed over them like skeletal giants. In the distance, a lone wolf cried out. A memory flickered a small station where her mom would wait for the bus to Aspen Hollow Market. "It's warm there," she desperately thought. "There's a light." With shaking arms, she tightened Rosie's blanket and forced herself to move. The snow was knee-deep, a relentless enemy, but she pushed on. Each step was a searing pain. Every gust of wind tore the air from her lungs. Her fingers were numb, lifeless, but her grip on her sister was unbreakable, a lifeline in the storm. Miles away, deep in the heart of Aspen Hollow, Officer Thomas Grayson navigated the blizzard in his patrol SUV. The wipers groaned, fighting a losing battle against the glass, barely clearing the onslaught of snow. Tom was 32, a tall man with broad shoulders, his calm blue eyes and square jaw etched with a deep, permanent weariness. His uniform was immaculate, but his stare often looked past the road into memory. Beside him sat Ranger, his German Shepherd partner, a powerful, muscular dog, a long scar tracing the line of his hind leg, a lasting reminder of a collapsed rescue tunnel the year before. Technically, Ranger was retired, but Tom could never leave his partner behind. They had both lost far too much to be separated. "Visibility's down to 50 feet, Tom mumbled, fiddling with the radio. Only static crackled back. The dispatch signal swallowed by the storm was failing. Ranger whined low in his throat, his breath clouding the glass. His ears pivoted instantly, alert, utterly focused. Tom shot him a look. "What is it, pal? You catch a scent?" The shepherd pressed his nose to the cold glass, twitching. A single sharp bark cut the silence. "All right, boy," Tom acknowledged, easing his foot from the accelerator. "Let's go have a look." He veered onto an unpaved road that snaked past the old freight yard. His headlights sliced through the whiteout, revealing rusted tracks and benches half swallowed by drifts. Then Ranger barked again, this time with urgency, planting a firm paw against the window. A jolt went through Tom. He slammed on the brakes, snatching his flashlight, and threw open the door. The wind howled, trying to tear it from his grip. "Stay close, boy." Together they plunged into the deep snow, Ranger taking the lead, his nose glued to the ground. Tom's flashlight beam cut a shaky path through the blizzard, finally settling on the station's silhouette. And there, huddled in a corner by the shattered ticket window, he saw them. Two small forms wrapped in a single blanket, utterly still. Oh my God. He fell to his knees beside them, gently brushing snow from Laya's hair. Her skin was a ghostly white, her lips chapped and broken. The baby in her arms was terrifyingly limp. Hey kiddo, can you hear me?" Laya's eyelids trembled. "Please, don't take Rosie," she breathed, her voice a fragile whisper. "I'm not going to take her," Tom promised, his own voice soft. "I'm here to help. You both need to get warm." He unzipped his heavy patrol jacket, cocooning them both inside its warmth. Ranger pressed in his warmth a comfort against Laya's legs. He nuzzled the baby's cheek, letting out a soft, concerned whine. "She's breathing," Tom whispered, relief washing over him. With the utmost care, he lifted them both, one in each arm. The girl was light as a feather, the baby a mere whisper of weight. Ranger circled them once, then trotted ahead to lead, clearing their path back to the vehicle. As Tom laid them gently in back, the heater was already blasting out warmth. He keyed the radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 23. 2 minors recovered, female, ages approximately 7 years and 6 months. Both hypothermic en route to Aspen Hollow, General. Have a pediatric team ready." The line crackled with static interference. A faint voice answered. "Copy that, 23. Tom glanced in the rearview mirror. Leia was still completely unconscious. Her arms remained locked protectively around the baby. He reached back to adjust the blanket. Ranger settled beside them, ever watchful. His amber eyes never left their small faces. As the SUV lurched onto the icy road, Tom's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. The storm outside was merciless, but inside the cruiser there was warmth and the faint, steady hum of the engine. the rhythm of fragile breathing and a flicker of something Tom hadn't felt in years. Hope. For just one moment, he thought of his own little girl, the one lost to a fever 5 winters ago. Her laughter had faded, but tonight in the storm, it was as if her spirit had guided him right to them. He whispered into the quiet, "I found them, sweetheart." Beside him, Ranger gave a soft huff, as if he understood. The cruiser then disappeared into the vast white horizon, its siren silent, its tires humming like a heartbeat beneath the snow. And in the back seat, under layers of blankets and borrowed heat, 2 small sisters slept their lives tethered once more to a fragile thread of mercy. Snow clawed at the windshield like fingers trying to break in. The patrol SUV rumbled its way down the mountain road. Its headlights cut thin ribbons through the raging blizzard. Inside, warmth fought hard against the cold with the heater's steady hum and the rhythmic clatter of chains on tires. Officer Thomas Grayson's hands gripped the steering wheel so tight his knuckles were pale. In back, the 2 girls lay bundled in his jacket. The older one, Leia, had stopped trembling, but her lips were still tinged with blue. The baby Rosie made soft, broken sounds, half whimpers, half breaths. Every sound was a blade in Tom's chest. Beside them, Ranger sat perfectly still and watchful. His large frame formed a living wall between the children and the cold. The shepherd's dark fur was lightly dusted with frost, his amber eyes alert and unwavering. He would lean forward, his nose hovering just above Rosie's small chest, as if counting her breaths. "Hang in there, kids," Tom whispered more to himself than to them. "You're safe now?" The radio crackled. "Unit 23, this is dispatch. Confirming 2 female minors, both alive." Tom pressed the mic. "Copy that. 7 years, 6 months. Severe hypothermia, dehydration, ETA 15 minutes to Aspen Hollow, General." "Roger that, 23. The ER has been notified." He replaced the mic, his eyes immediately finding the rearview mirror. Leia's head had slumped limply to one side, her hand still clutching the blanket that was covering her sister. That sight twisted something deep in his gut. For a moment, he was back in another hospital 5 winters ago, standing beside a white crib, holding a tiny, fragile hand that had already gone cold. His own daughter, Emily. The memory crashed over him, a phantom wave of grief. But he shoved it down. "Not tonight," he vowed silently. "Tonight I bring someone else's little girl home safe." Ranger's ears twitched, pulling him from the past. "Good boy," Tom whispered, his voice low. "Keep watch, pal." Outside, the storm raged with a new fury. Snow danced across the road in blinding sheets, swallowing the world beyond the headlights. Across town, a single, lonely light cut through the gloom in the Aspen Hollow train depot window. Inside Harlan Everett, the nightman was hunched over a mug of coffee that had turned to ice hours before. Harlan was 72, his hair a shock of white like fresh frost, his face a road map carved by decades of mountain winds. His uniform was worn thin, the badge on his chest gleaming from habit, not just duty. He'd kept this station running for 40 long years, long enough to read the town's secrets in every whistle, every echo, every ghost of a sound carried on the storm. He was listening to the wind's howl when a sudden bark pierced the blizzard's roar. It wasn't far off. It was sharp, desperate. With creaking joints, he pushed himself out of the chair and squinted through the glass. Through the driving curtains of snow, he could just make out a faint dancing light, a flashlight beam cutting across the tracks. "Now what in the world?" he mumbled to himself. Seconds later, the deep rumble of an engine tore past the depot. Harlan glimpsed the silhouette of a patrol SUV racing down the empty road, its taillights bleeding red into the whiteout. A cold knot formed in his stomach. He reached for the phone hanging by the ticket booth, its cord long and coiled with age. The old man's fingers trembled as he dialed. 911, what is your emergency?" The operator's voice crackled. "This is Harlan Everett down at the Aspen Hollow Depot," he said, his words spilling out. "I just saw one of your patrol cars down by the yard. No lights. Dog barking its head off. Looked like the officer was carrying something. You better tell him the old bridge road is gone at Miller's Creek. If he tries that way, he'll end up straight in the river before he can blink." The dispatcher took the message. Harlan placed the receiver back in its cradle, a heavy, nameless dread tightening in his chest. He turned back to the window, to the endless, swirling white. "God help whoever's caught out in this," he whispered to the glass. Back on the road, Tom's radio crackled to life. "Unit 23 be advised. Steer clear of the Miller's Creek Bridge. It's washed out from the flooding." Tom hissed an exhale. "Copy that dispatch. I'm taking Southridge instead." He flipped on the high beams, cutting a brighter swath through the dark. Ranger shifted his nose, pressed hard against the cold glass. The road split before them, one path descending into the valley, the other climbing the ridge. He wrenched the wheel. As they ascended, the blizzard seemed to ease just a bit, revealing the distant, hazy glow of the town below. Tom glanced in the rearview mirror just in time to see Rosie's tiny chest still. Hey, no!" His voice fractured with panic. He slammed on the brakes, skidding to a halt, and twisted in his seat. The baby was terrifyingly still. Leia's small hand still clutched to the blanket, didn't move. "Come on, kiddo, stay with me." He ripped the thermal kit from the glove compartment, tearing the foil blanket open and swaddling Rosie in its silver sheen. Her skin felt like ice against his fingertips. Ranger whined, nudging Leia's leg with his paw. The sound was a low, mournful cry that filled the tight space. Tom began rubbing the baby's back with quick, firm strokes, leaning in close until he felt a ghost of a breath against his wrist. It was faint, but it was there. "That's it, good girl," he whispered. "You fight. You hear me? You fight. Hard." The SUV's heater blasted roaring against the silence. The heater's vents fogged the cold glass. Tom clutched the infant to his chest, hoping his own warmth could seep through the fabric. Then the baby gave a faint shudder, a sound like a quiet sigh escaping an endless sleep. Ranger's tail gave one knowing thump on the seat. Tom took a single, ragged breath of relief before shifting the truck back into gear. As they reached the edge of Aspen Hollow, the storm finally began to recede. Streetlights appeared like distant fireflies in the mist. The snow continued to fall, but gently now, like feathers instead of daggers. The hospital's lights emerged at the end of the road. Aspen Hollow. General, a stoic brick, building its blue emergency sign, a pulsing heartbeat through the dense white fog. Tom sped directly into the ER bay. The automatic doors slid open with a sharp hiss, unleashing a wave of sterile yellow light. He killed the engine, jumped out, and quickly opened the rear door. Ranger was right behind him, landing silently beside him in the snow. Tom gently lifted the precious bundle, cradling the baby to his heart while supporting Leia's limp form, with his arm, her head, resting on his shoulder. Inside the doors, the night nurse at the front desk looked up. "2 minors hypothermic," Tom gasped. "Call pediatric emergency right now." The nurse snatched the phone, shouting for help down the hall. Tom followed an orderly who was rushing forward with a gurney. He gently laid the girls down, one hand remaining on the baby's blanket. "The infant's breathing is shallow, but it's stable. There. The older one is in shock, dehydrated. They need warmth and fluids." The staff moved in a blur, their voices overlapping. Calls for medical codes. IVs and warmers filled the air. Ranger stood guard by the door, his chest heaving heavily. His dark coat glistened beneath the fluorescent lights. Tom took a step back, his breath clouding the air. His arms began to tremble as the adrenaline faded. He felt the biting cold seep into his hands, but he remained perfectly still. His gaze was locked on the gurney as it vanished into the treatment room. A passing nurse spoke to him softly. "Sir, you can wait right here." He nodded numbly, collapsing onto a nearby bench. Ranger padded over and sat closely beside him, resting his heavy head on Tom's knee. For the first time all night, Tom felt the crushing weight of the silence around him. The storm outside was quiet, but its memory echoed in his heart. The wind's howl, a dog's bark, a baby's cry in the endless snow. At the train depot, Harlan Everett turned off the lights and locked the door. The worst of the storm was now over, but an intuition told him this night was not yet over. He glanced once more down the dark road and whispered to the wind, "I pray they made it." In the hospital hall, Tom leaned forward, elbows on his knees, while Ranger remained a silent statue by his side. Behind the door, muffled voices gave orders, the sound of medical machines humming back to life. Then through the glass, a thin, fragile sound emerged. A baby's cry. Ranger's ears perked. Tom's head snapped up. The sound grew louder, stronger, slicing through the hospital's quiet hum. The tightness in Tom's chest eased as he exhaled. "That's it," he whispered. "That's the sound I was waiting for." Outside, the first rays of dawn began to crest the white hills of Aspen Hollow, spilling gold across the pristine snow. And for the first time in years, Tom Grayson felt the darkness finally give way to the morning. The emergency ward of Aspen Hollow General hummed with a quiet, steady rhythm. The rhythmic pulse of monitors, the soft hiss of life-giving oxygen, the muffled rush of footsteps across gleaming floors. A dusting of snow clung to the window panes, catching the distant streetlights and casting a pale silver luminescence down the corridor. Within a small trauma bay, Nurse Amelia Vaughn moved with a swift, practiced grace, a woman who had long since mastered the art of navigating the line between crisis and calm. She was 28, tall with warm brown skin and chestnut hair pulled back in a tight bun that had surrendered its perfection after a grueling 12-hour night shift. Behind her rectangular frames, her soft gray eyes, though patient, were rimmed with exhaustion, holding the unspoken weight of a soul who had witnessed too much and said too little. Her scrubs were faintly wrinkled, the pocket of her top holding the simple tools of her trade, a penlight, a folded notepad, and a faded photograph of children she'd once looked after at the orphanage that raised her. The moment the two little girls were wheeled in, she didn't utter a word. Instead, she drew a sharp breath, her body instinctively sensing the gravity of the moment before her mind could process it. The older child was heartbreakingly small, her skin alarmingly pale, her tangled brown hair matted with ice. Her hand, though limp, gripped the blanket around the baby with a force so unyielding it took Amelia 2 attempts to pry it free. "She refuses to let go," a paramedic muttered softly. "Then we won't make her," Amelia answered, her voice low and steady. "Son, she's protecting her sister. We'll simply work around it." The infant Rosie was cold to the touch, her breaths shallow and faint, but steady. Amelia's voice softened, leaning in close. "Hey there, little fighter. You're not ready to give up yet, are you?" Her gloved hands moved with purpose. She secured the IV, adjusted the warming lamp overhead, and motioned for a warming pad. A second nurse passed her a small vial. "Core temp is rising, but slowly," Amelia announced. "Maintain the fluid drip." She leaned over the bassinet, tenderly tucking the blanket's edge closer to the infant's small cheeks. "You're safe now," she whispered. Her eyes lifted, catching a glimpse through the partially open door. Officer Thomas Grayson, sitting on a bench under the sterile fluorescent light, his elbows on his knees, his head bowed. He hadn't moved an inch since they arrived. Amelia studied him for a moment from the doorway. He looked like a man sculpted from duty and sorrow. His broad shoulders were slumped beneath the uniform, his dark hair still damp from the melting snow, his face a mask of quiet torment. Though his police badge glinted in the light, he wore it not with pride, but with the heavy burden of memory. Beside him, Ranger, the German shepherd, lay like a loyal sentinel. The dog's thick coat remained damp. His amber eyes were half-lidded but never truly rested. Each time a nurse hurried past, Ranger's ears would twitch, ever alert. "Is that his canine partner?" another nurse whispered to Amelia. "Retired, I believe," Amelia replied softly. "But it seems some jobs are for life." She moved away from the bassinet and stepped quietly into the hallway. Tom didn't raise his head as she approached, but she noticed how his fingers twitched with a restless energy, as if they were torn between wanting to pray and trying to hold something that was already gone. They're stable for now, she said gently. The baby's temp is rising, and the older girl is responding to the warm IV fluids. She should wake up soon. Tom let out a shaky breath. Thank God. His voice was a low rasp worn down by fatigue. You're the one who found them. He nodded, his eyes fixed on the floor. They were inside the old station, a structure the storm had almost reclaimed. Amelia lowered herself to meet his gaze. Then you likely saved their lives. A faint, hollow smile touched his lips. I just did my job. No, she said, her tone firm yet gentle. You did what any father would do. Those words made him meet her eyes. His eyes were a tempest of their own, blue-gray, weary and haunted. Do you have children? She asked softly. After a long pause, he shook his head. Had a daughter, 5 years ago. A fever took her. Amelia felt her throat tighten. I'm so sorry. Tom offered only a single nod, as if apologies were a currency he no longer valued. Ranger then lifted his head, sensing the sudden shift in the heavy air. The loyal dog's gaze shifted between them, understanding the silence far better than any words. Amelia reached out her hand, brushing across Ranger's head. He's beautiful, she whispered, and so loyal. The barest hint of a smile touched Tom's lips. Yeah, he's all I have left now. Inside the trauma room, soft beeps filled the air as Laya began to stir. Her eyelids fluttered, opening to a blur of light and muted voices. Her first sight was the unfamiliar ceiling. Her second was her sister, Rosie, sleeping in a crib beside her, bathed in a warm orange glow. Rosie, Laya whispered. Amelia stepped quietly to her side. She's okay, Amelia said gently. She's safe, both of you are. Laya's eyes searched the room frantically. Where is the man? Do you mean Travis? Amelia asked softly. Laya nodded, her eyes wide with fear. He isn't here, Amelia promised. He can't hurt you anymore. Laya blinked hard against the tears that wouldn't fall, her gaze returning to her tiny, peaceful sister. Amelia sat on the edge of the bed. You were so brave, she said softly. You kept her alive out there. Laya's lower lip trembled. I tried to feed her, but there was no more milk. Amelia gently brushed a wisp of hair from the child's brow. You did everything you could. Laya turned her head, her eyes finding Ranger lying faithfully just beyond the glass wall of the door. The dog, he was the one who found us. Amelia smiled warmly. Yes, he did. He and the officer. The long night wore on. Outside, the storm finally exhausted itself, leaving a faint moan of wind. The hospital halls grew quiet, the urgency melting into a weary calm. Amelia made her way back to the nurse's station, pouring lukewarm coffee into a cup before she finally checked her messages. A new message was blinking on the screen from Miss Claire Renner, director of the Havenbrook Orphanage. It read, Amelia, I know you're working, but a woman, Evelyn Price, is here looking for her daughters who are missing. She said the police have no leads, but she's convinced they're somewhere near Aspen Hollow. She begged me to contact anyone who might know anything. Their names are Laya and Rosie Hart. Amelia froze the coffee cup, trembling in her hand. The name Laya pierced through the fog of her exhaustion like a flash of light. Her eyes shot to the trauma room, to the little girl sleeping under the monitor's glow. Laya, and Rosie. She whispered, the air catching in her throat. It was as if fate had woven their lives together with her own. With newfound purpose, she typed a reply with steady hands. Claire, they are here. They're alive. Both of them. I'm contacting the authorities to notify their mother immediately. Before hitting send, she paused, looking through the observation window. Tom was still sitting out in the hallway, his head tilted back against the wall, his eyes half closed. Ranger lay at his feet, his tail tapping a slow, gentle rhythm on the tile. It struck her then how the night had gathered the broken, a cop, haunted by loss, a nurse who'd never known a parent and 2 children left for dead in a storm. Amelia let her phone fall, choosing silence for now. There would be time enough to make the call. But tonight she just needed to watch them breathe to be certain that life had truly taken hold again. She drew closer to the glass, her faint reflection ghosting beside the monitor's dim glow. Inside, Laya shifted in her sleep, one small hand reaching toward the crib beside her. Rosie stirred her tiny fingers uncurling in the air, searching for warmth. Amelia stepped forward, resting her palm on the door. Her voice was a bare whisper. "You're not alone anymore." Behind her, Ranger lifted his head, as if in silent agreement. Tom stirred his eyes opening. They met briefly across the quiet corridor, and for the first time that night they shared a silent, profound understanding. A feeling that this wasn't the end of the storm, but maybe the start of their healing. Outside, the last snowflakes drifted past the window panes, soft and silent. Aspen Hollow slept beneath a blanket of silence and redemption. And somewhere out in the darkness, the echo of Evelyn Price's desperate search pulsed through the night, drawing ever closer to the light, waiting for her at the hospital. The storm itself was over, but its icy breath still clung to the Sierra foothills. The air felt brittle enough to shatter. The roads were glazed with ice, and trees drooped low, heavy with snow. Evelyn Price staggered along the narrow roadside, her coat stiff with frost, her boots soaked through. Every single step was a war against exhaustion. Each breath was a desperate prayer whispered into the biting wind. She hadn't truly slept in days. Her auburn hair, once neatly tied, now clung to her face in frozen strands. The soft lines of her face, once held in quiet grace, were now carved with grief and starvation. Her hazel eyes, once warm, now burned with a single purpose to find her daughters. The small duffel bag over her shoulder held all she had left in the world. Half a loaf of stale bread, a bottle of melted snow, and a photograph wrapped in plastic. A picture of her holding Laya and baby Rosie on a summer morning before their world shattered. She had been following ghosts, rumors, and half-remembered directions from strangers who'd seen a man with 2 little girls near the highway. Some pointed north. Others just shook their heads, their eyes full of pity. But still she pressed on. The memory of that night was burned into her soul. Travis Maroro, her husband in name only, had always been a violent storm waiting to break. His fury came in waves, sharp words, slammed doors, the sound of shattering glass against the walls. When she finally found the courage to escape, she'd only made it to a friend's car before the horrifying realization hit. He had the girls. He'd taken them to punish her, to force her to crawl back. She had spent the last 5 days chasing phantoms through the snow. By day 3, her bread was gone. By the 4th day, her voice was raw from screaming their names. Her hands were bleeding from the cold, and still she walked. On the 5th morning, she stumbled to the edge of a small town, Aspen Hollow, its rooftops still buried in snow, with smoke curling gently from chimneys. A local diner stood open, its neon sign flickering like a weak pulse. Inside, the sudden warmth was almost painful. Evelyn collapsed into a booth, her bag thudding onto the seat beside her. The waitress, a sturdy woman in her 50s with compassionate eyes and a snowflake brooch on her apron, approached with a gentle caution. "Honey, you look like you've been through hell and back," she murmured, placing a mug of hot coffee on the table. "You all right?" Evelyn offered a trembling smile. "I'm just looking for my children." The waitress's brow furrowed. "Do you have somewhere to stay?" Evelyn just shook her head. "Not yet. I can't stop. Not until I find them." The woman paused, her gaze shifting to a small television humming quietly on the counter. "You need to hear this," she urged, turning up the volume. A reporter's voice cut through the diner, and Evelyn's entire world froze. 2 young girls, they believed to be sisters, were rescued late last night from the blizzard near the Aspen Hollow railway station. Officials confirm both are in stable condition at the town hospital. As of now, no parents have come forward. The rest of the newscast became a meaningless blur. The coffee mug slipped from Evelyn's numb fingers, shattering across the floor. She gripped the table's edge as the room spun her lips, forming silent words that finally emerged as broken whispers. Illa. Rosie. Tears carved hot trails down her frozen cheeks. The kind waitress rushed to her side, helping her to her feet, but Evelyn was already a force of motion, pushing back out into the swirling snow. Her legs gave out halfway down the block. She fell, her palms hitting the icy slush as gut-wrenching sobs stole her breath. For days she had braced herself for the absolute worst, for a quiet grave, a tragic headline, a silence that would stretch into forever. But this was hope. Raw, fragile, and trembling. It was a terrifying hope. She forced herself up, swiping at her tears with shaking hands, and began to run in the direction the waitress had pointed, toward Aspen Hollow General Hospital. And at that very same hour, miles and miles away, Officer Tom Grayson and his unit were pushing through a snow-choked clearing behind a derelict cabin. The storm had devoured the entire landscape, leaving behind a stark, silent wasteland. Tom pulled his scarf tighter and methodically scanned the perimeter. This is the place, he said under his breath. Coordinates match the tip from the gas station. The man at his side, Deputy Carl Jensen, was a stocky man in his early 30s with a wild reddish beard. He was still new to the force, but moved with the restless energy of a man eager to prove his worth. Clerk said some guy came in last week, Carl reported, flipping through his notepad. Bought a case of beer infant formula and a bottle of cheap whiskey. Drove a blue pickup, half the license plate gone. It's a match for the Bolo on Travis Maroro. Tom gave a grim nod. Let's sweep the area. He glanced down at Ranger, his veteran K9 partner, who was already working nose down, circling the porch. The dog's tail gave a single sharp flick. Alert! A low bark, and then he shot off toward a collapsed shed behind the cabin. Tom was right behind him, his boots crunching in the frozen snow. Inside the dilapidated shed, Ranger began digging at a pile of filthy discarded blankets. Underneath lay a small baby bottle, half-frozen milk clinging to its rim. Nearby, the jagged neck of a whiskey bottle glittered like a shard of ice. Carl knelt beside him. Guess he didn't last too long playing the father, he said, his voice laced with disgust. Tom's jaw clenched. He used them as leverage, and when that didn't work, he just threw them away. As if in agreement, Ranger let out a deep, low growl, his snout nudging a heavy boot print that was pressed deep into the snow. Tom knelt carefully, tracing its outline with a gloved finger. Size 11. He breathed the words a whisper. The exact same tread from the station's security tapes. Carl's sigh clouded the frigid air. If he's smart, he's a ghost by now. Tom stood tall. No, men like Travis don't run. They find a bottle instead. They go to ground thinking no one's looking. But we're coming. Ranger's bark was a sharp, certain echo. Then the police radio crackled to life. Unit 23, this is dispatch. We've got a 911 update out of the hospital. A woman identified as Evelyn Price has just arrived, claiming she's the mother of those 2 rescued minors. Tom felt his chest tighten. He exchanged a solemn, silent look with Carl. Copy that dispatch. We're on our way. He turned to Ranger, whose ears were already at attention. Ready? Let's go, my friend. As they got into their vehicle, the snow returned, falling softer now, like ash instead of ice. And over at the hospital, Evelyn stumbled through the sliding doors, barely conscious, half frozen. Her face was a raw portrait of tears and fierce windburn. A startled security guard rushed to her side. I'm looking for my daughters, she gasped out. Lila and Rosie Price. Please, just tell me they're here. The nurse at the front desk's eyes widened with recognition. Ma'am, please have a seat. Yes, they're here. They were brought in last night. Evelyn's hands flew to her mouth, a silent gasp of hope. Her legs buckled beneath her, and she collapsed into a nearby chair, trembling uncontrollably. Are they alive? The nurse offered a gentle smile. Yes, ma'am. Alive. And they're safe now. Evelyn pressed her face into her hands and finally sobbed. All those agonizing days of fear, the sleepless nights of guilt, the gnawing hunger, the bitter cold, it all came pouring out of her like a breaking dam. For the first time in an eternity, she finally let herself cry, not from despair, but from overwhelming relief. Through the tears, she whispered their names like a sacred prayer. "Lila, Rosie, Mommy's here now." Outside the hospital, the snow started to lighten, and far down the long road, a faint siren began to rise. A patrol car was racing toward this very place, carrying the scent of a man who believed he could disappear into the winter night. But not in Aspen Hollow. Not on this night. The corridors of Aspen Hollow, General, were strangely quiet that morning. Awash in the pale winter light that filtered through frosted windows, nurses glided softly between the hospital rooms. The sharp scent of antiseptic mingled with the faint, sweet aroma of coffee brewing somewhere down the hall. Down the hall, a monitor beeped steadily, a fragile rhythm of life holding on. The moment Evelyn Price walked through those hospital doors, time itself seemed to stand still. Her breath caught as her eyes swept the sterile corridor. For a single heartbeat, she was frozen, afraid this was another dream, one more cruel trick of hope. And then she saw them. Through the small glass window of room 214, a little girl was propped against pillows, her small shoulders enveloped in a hospital blanket. Beside her, a crib glowed warmly under a soft orange light. "Lila," Evelyn whispered, her voice barely there, and her voice shattering with emotion. The nurse at the station, Amelia Vaughn, turned at the sound, her smile gentle. "You must be her mother." Evelyn's eyes welled with tears. "Yes, I am Evelyn Price." Without hesitating, Amelia swung the door wide open for her. Inside the room was impossibly still. Lila turned at the sound of soft footsteps. For just 1 second, Thunder confusion flickered across her pale face, then a wave of recognition. "Mommy." The word was almost silent, but it shattered the heavy silence. Evelyn crossed the room in 2 trembling strides and dropped to her knees beside the bed. She gathered Leia into a desperate embrace, her heartbroken sobs lost in her daughter's shoulder. "I'm here, my sweet girl," she whispered, a mantra of relief. "I'm right here now. I am so sorry." Leia held on tight, her small hands clutching the frayed fabric of her mother's coat. The little girl's tears erupted in waves, the kind that finally break free after days of being trapped by fear. In the small crib next to them, Rosie stirred, awakened by the familiar sound of her mother's voice. Her tiny fingers uncurled, her lips parted, and the softest whimper escaped her. It was a fragile sound, but it was the sound of life. Evelyn leaned close, pressing a kiss to the baby's forehead as her own tears fell without restraint. "My precious baby, you are safe now." Just beyond them, Tom Grayson remained silent, a solemn figure in the doorway. His uniform was immaculate, a stark contrast to the profound exhaustion etched around his eyes. Ranger sat faithfully at his side, his powerful form filling the doorway, his tail giving a single slow sweep across the floor before falling still. For a long time, Tom said nothing, watching the scene. This reunion, a mother holding her children again, stirred something deep inside his soul, an ache that was both raw and painfully familiar. Amelia came to stand beside him, her presence a quiet comfort. "You should come inside," she offered gently. Tom just shook his head. "This moment is theirs," he murmured. Ranger let out a low breath, his gaze fixed on Evelyn cradling her 2 girls. After several minutes, Evelyn at last raised her head, her gaze locking with Tom's. She didn't know who he was, only that this man and his incredible dog had brought her children back from the brink. "Thank you," she managed, her voice shaking but filled with unwavering certainty. "You saved my children." Tom's jaw clenched. "They were the ones brave enough to survive," he replied. "We just got here when it counted the most." Evelyn extended a hand toward Ranger. The shepherd moved forward without hesitation, lowering his noble head to meet her touch as she gently stroked his muzzle. "You are such a good boy," she whispered through her tears. "You brought them home to me." Ranger's amber eyes glimmered with deep intelligence, his breath pluming in the crisp morning air. And at that very same moment, just 20 meters away at the county line, Travis Marrero staggered from a dilapidated gas station, the stench of cheap whiskey heavy on his breath, his beard a wild mess and his jacket ripped. He had foolishly believed the snow could be his sanctuary, that the blizzard had washed away his crimes. But the world was far smaller than he imagined. A patrol car was idling by the pumps, its engine a low thrum. Then Ranger's bark shattered the stillness, sharp and piercing, authoritative. "Police," Tom's voice boomed as he emerged from the driver's side, his hand resting on his holster. "Travis Marrero, you are under arrest." Travis went rigid. His bloodshot eyes flickered to the tree line, a desperate search for escape, then snapped back to the dog. Now pacing in the snow ears, alert, its entire body tense. Travis took a faltering step back, muttering, "You don't have any proof?" Ranger surged forward, letting out a single sharp bark. That was all it took. Travis spun and fled, his feet sliding out from under him on a sheet of ice as he stumbled down the slope, kicking up plumes of snow. "Stop!" Tom's command sliced through the wind, but the fugitive ignored it, desperate to get away. He managed only 5 more desperate strides before his boot caught on a hidden log. He went down hard, face first, into a snowdrift. By the time he could roll over, Ranger was already there, looming over him, a silent and terrifying sentinel with teeth bared. The dog didn't need to bite. The low growl rumbling in his chest was more persuasive than any shout. Tom walked up, his breath clouding the frigid air. "It's over," he said, cuffing Travis's wrists. He hauled the man to his feet. "You left 2 children to die in a blizzard," Tom stated, his voice devoid of emotion. "There's no running away from that." Travis sneered a pathetic sound. "They weren't my kids." Tom's gaze turned to ice. "No, but they were hers. And you took them from her. That's worse." Ranger's single bark was low and final, as if sealing the verdict in stone. Weeks later, Aspen Hollow's courthouse was packed to the rafters. The snow had melted to gray slush, yet a deep chill lingered. Reporters lined the steps as townspeople filled the wooden benches, whispering about the trial that had captivated them for weeks. At the defense table sat Travis Marrero, pale and hollow-eyed, his orange jumpsuit a stark contrast to the polished oak. His hands were shackled. He stared at the floor, his jaw tight, as the prosecutor listed the charges: kidnapping, child endangerment, domestic assault, and neglect. Tom Grayson took the witness stand, his uniform immaculate. His voice remained calm and unwavering as he described the night of the rescue. The tracks, the frozen bottle, the footprints by the cabin. When he concluded, the courtroom was shrouded in silence. Even the judge, a woman named Margaret Reeves, a stern figure with silver hair and sharp eyes, paused for a long moment before speaking. "Travis Marrero," her voice echoed in the chamber. "Your actions nearly extinguished 2 innocent lives. You held those children hostage from a place of cruelty, not care. For that, this court sentences you to 12 years in state prison." Travis never lifted his head. Evelyn sat in the back row. Leia's small hand was wrapped tightly around hers. Rosie slept in her lap, peaceful and unaware as the gavel struck. The sound felt like a closing door, not just on the guilty, but on the pain that had haunted every one of them. In the weeks that followed, Aspen Hollow revealed itself as a town of quiet compassion. Neighbors arrived with groceries and clothes. The church held a fundraiser. The local paper ran a front-page headline, "Mother reunited with daughters after blizzard miracle." Evelyn and her girls were given a small cottage on the town's edge, a profound gift from the entire community. On their very first morning there, Leia played in the front yard while Rosie cooed softly from her crib. Amelia stopped by, often bringing books and baby formula. Tom visited on weekends, Ranger always at his side. When Leia asked if the big dog could visit again, Tom simply smiled. He's already decided this is his second home. And for the first time in what felt like forever, laughter returned to their little house by the pines. Spring had come back to Aspen Hollow like a gentle apology. The snow that had once buried their world was now a memory melting into the soft earth as wildflowers pushed through patches of green. The scent of pine filled the crisp mountain air. The little cottage standing at the edge of the valley looked as if it had grown from the forest itself. It had whitewashed walls and a front porch lined with weathered clay pots, and a small wooden sign over the door reading "The Hollow Nest." It wasn't much, but it was everything. It was home. Inside, sunlight filtered through the lace curtains, catching dust motes as they performed a golden dance. Evelyn Price stood at the window, tying back her honey-colored hair with a ribbon. Her hands were calloused now, not from hardship, but from the act of rebuilding, of fixing creaky hinges, planting flowers with her daughter, and learning all over again what it meant to live without fear. Her laughter came so much more easily these days. As she bent to lift Rosie from her crib, the baby reached for her hair, tugging it playfully. Evelyn chuckled, kissing her tiny fingers. "You're getting stronger every day," she whispered. Just then, outside, the rumble of an engine sounded on the gravel path. Leia's voice called from the porch, bright and eager. "Mom, it's Mr. Tom and Ranger," Evelyn said with a warm smile. "We'll go say hi before they devour all the cookies again." Leia sprinted across the lawn, her long brown hair trailing behind her like a ribbon. Her yellow sundress danced around her, fluttering like a daffodil petal on the breeze. As the truck door creaked open, Ranger leaped out first, his magnificent coat shimmering in the sunlight, his tail a joyful banner waving in the air. "Ranger!" Leia cried out, her voice filled with delight as she wrapped her arms around the German shepherd's powerful neck. The great dog held perfectly still, then gently leaned into her, resting his noble head against her shoulder. "You're the one who found me," she whispered, her voice filled with a gratitude so deep that words could never hold it. Tom Grayson emerged from the truck, a basket clutched in one hand and a manila folder in the other. He was dressed down casually, in a faded gray t-shirt and jeans, yet his bearing held that same quiet confidence. His dark hair was cut shorter now, neatly trimmed, and a new gentleness had settled in his eyes. "Hey, kiddo," he said, a warm grin spreading across his face. "Been keeping this old dog out of trouble," Leia giggled. "He doesn't get into trouble. He keeps me out of it." "That sounds about right." As Tom made his way up the walkway, Evelyn appeared on the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. For a fleeting moment, the sunlight caught her hair, framing her face in a golden halo. She had reclaimed some of her former radiance. Though a delicate wariness remained, the kind that never truly fades, but settles softly into the soul. "Morning, officer." She greeted, a playful smile on her lips. Tom tipped an imaginary hat. "Just Tom today, and I come bearing muffins and paperwork. The town council approved the final funding for this place. It's officially all yours now." Her eyes grew wide. "Are you serious?" He nodded, extending the folder to her. "Signed and sealed. The whole community wanted you to have a fresh start." Evelyn pressed a hand to her heart, her voice catching with emotion. "I don't know how I can ever thank everyone." "You already have," Tom said softly. "You survived." Ranger barked once as if to say he agreed. Evelyn gave a soft laugh, bending to scratch the loyal dog behind his ears. A cry from Rosie's crib inside made her excuse herself to get the baby. Tom leaned against the porch railing, his eyes following her as she disappeared inside the sun, catching the golden strands of her hair. There was a new strength in how she carried herself, now steady, graceful, and unafraid. He didn't even realize he was smiling until Leia's voice cut through his thoughts. "You like my mom, don't you?" Tom nearly choked. "What makes you say that?" Leia just shrugged, a wise gesture only a 7-year-old could manage. You look at her like she's the sunrise. Tom chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief. You're too smart for your own good, kiddo. Ranger gave a short bark that sounded remarkably like a laugh. A few weeks later, the backyard of the small cottage had blossomed into a vibrant community garden, a place of new life. Evelyn and Leia were planting lilies, while Amelia Vaughn knelt with a small group of children, sketching with chalk on the stone walkway. Amelia had transformed too. Her hair was cut shorter now, a few stray strands tucked neatly behind one ear. Her once guarded expression softened into a warm, open smile. She had launched a program she called the Haven Circle, providing art therapy and a safe space for children who had endured great hardship or loss. Leia was her first inspiration and her most devoted helper. All right, everyone, Amelia said, clapping her hands together softly. I want you to draw something that makes you feel safe. The children hunched over their sidewalk canvases. Leia sketched a towering pine, a cozy home nestled beneath, and a loyal friend with pointed ears standing guard. That's Ranger, she declared with pride. Amelia's smile grew tender. Of course it is. Nearby, Tom leaned against his cruiser, a quiet pride swelling in his chest as he watched them. He turned as a local journalist approached him, Hank Milan, a balding man, his face etched with kindness, a camera draped around his neck. Officer Grayson, Hank greeted. Mind if I get a few shots for the paper? It's about Ranger's award. Tom's gaze drifted to the dog, resting peacefully in the cool shade. Leia's pink scarf was tied loosely around his neck. Sure, but he couldn't care less about medals. Hank chuckled. Maybe not, but this town sure does. That afternoon, the whole town gathered before the police station. Ranger sat faithfully by Tom's side as Mayor Collins, a stout man whose glasses forever slid down his nose, stepped forward clutching a small velvet box. Today, the mayor began, we honor a true hero, one who cannot speak yet, whose courage roars louder than any words we could ever say. He opened the box, revealing a silver medallion engraved with K9 Guardian Medal. The crowd erupted in applause as Tom carefully clipped it onto Ranger's collar. The celebrated hero simply blinked and wagged his tail, far more interested in the treat Amelia was hiding behind her back. Evelyn stood near the front, holding Rosie with Leia close at her side. As Tom's gaze found hers, a warm smile spread across her face. It was a quiet, knowing smile that spoke volumes beyond simple gratitude. Later that evening, as the sun melted into hues of amber and rose behind the pine ridge, Evelyn's little cottage seemed to glow with life. Rosie babbled on a blanket, her tiny hands reaching for butterflies dancing over the garden. Leia and Ranger played beneath the trees, her laughter echoing like sweet wind chimes. Tom stood by the fence, his hands deep in his pockets, just watching them. The golden light of dusk caught in his eyes, softening the weary lines life had etched into his face. Amelia joined him, a basket of fresh herbs in her hand. You look like a man who's finally found his peace, she observed softly. He offered a faint smile. Maybe I have. They watched as Leia tumbled into the soft grass, giggling while Ranger showered her with happy licks. Evelyn called from the porch, waving them inside for dinner. For a moment, Tom hesitated, but then he gave a slow nod. Walking toward the warm glow of the house, he glanced down at Ranger and whispered, Ooh. Looks like we finally brought them home, boy. Ranger answered with a low, contented bark, his amber eyes mirroring the fading sunlight, as if to say, yes, we finally did. The evening breeze drifted by, carrying the sweet scent of pine and lilac. Here beneath the towering trees of Aspen Hollow, laughter and warmth filled the air again. It was the profound kind of peace that can only be found on the other side of a storm. Sometimes miracles don't announce themselves with thunder and lightning. They arrive softly in the shape of a loyal dog, or the heart of a kind stranger, or the courage to take one more step when the world has gone cold. In Aspen Hollow, divine grace wasn't a voice booming from the sky, but a gentle hand quietly guiding broken souls back toward each other. May this story serve as a reminder that no matter how lost we may feel, faith has the power to light our way home. In every small act of love, in every single moment of compassion, a higher power is at work, turning ordinary people into vessels for extraordinary miracles. If this story has touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs a reminder about hope. Let us know in the comments what faith means to you, and subscribe for more stories celebrating love, redemption, and the quiet miracles God places in our everyday lives. May He bless you always, those you love most,